Hello, and thanks for watching. My name is Kevin Harris, and I'm calling this the CARE Show. This comes from an internet show I used to do a few years ago called Christian Apologetics Internet Research. And so that we get the acronym CARE from that. This current series of videos is in biblical interpretation, and today's topic will be on Bible versions. And if you'll do me a favor, if you'll go to the YouTube channel, if you're watching this on Facebook, go to the YouTube channel and click subscribe for me there so that we can grow the YouTube channel. I would appreciate that. If you're watching this on the YouTube channel and you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Click like if you like the information, make comments, tell me what you don't like, tell me if you disagree. All of that is fine and wonderful. I can handle it. So to get into this in a little bit of depth and be as quick as possible, we're going to be discussing again Bible versions and what you need to understand in order to pick a good one. Okay, so let's jump into this Bible versions and why this is important. It's important, first of all, because you really need to be able to do the first part of what we talked about in the last video of hermeneutics, which is observation. What does it say? And a lot of that depends on the version that you're reading and how well you understand it. Now, what I'm about to give you, and this is my disclaimer, this is based on my experience as a teacher, a Bible teacher, as a seminary professor, and my own personal studies. And just use this as a guide. Do what's best for you through prayer and your own educational background as far as what you can understand. So let's jump in here and talk about Bible versions and what that actually means. So first of all, the Bible was written in three different languages. In your Old Testament, you had, of course, the Hebrew, Aramaic, and in the New Testament, the Greek language. What's wonderful about these three languages, they're dead languages. People still speak in these languages, but the versions of these languages are now that the Bible was written in, they're dead. That means that the words, the meaning hasn't changed over time. So what it says is what it says. And what's important about that is that we can trust that in its original language, the Bible is telling us exactly what we are supposed to know. But here's the deal, because if you've been to the Christian bookstore or anywhere, you know that there are a ton of different versions. And so what you need to understand is what they are and how you should go about looking for the version that's best for you. So I want to talk about the difference between a translator and an interpreter, or translation and an interpretation. One of the things we found out in hermeneutics is that what we're supposed to do is we're supposed to interpret the Bible. What a translator does is a translator takes the written words of a text and translates them from one language into another. So for most of you all that are probably watching this, English is the language that we speak, so we have all of the different English versions of the Bible. The thing with translations is this. A translator will attempt to translate word for word, extremely accurately, the words that are in the text that are being translated. So what that means is that it may come into our English language a bit stiff or wooden. It will lose some of the emotional impact that the original text has. It may lose some of the passion that it was written with, or maybe some of the fear, or whatever the case may be from an emotional perspective. It begins to lose a little something in the translation. So that's what a translator does. What an interpreter does, an interpreter hears the words of someone in one language and then attempts to speak those words to the listener that listens in a different language. But what they're doing is they're trying to interpret the message and then bring the message forward so that the person that is listening to their interpretation can get a good feel and a good understanding for what the other person's saying. To give you a quick example, if you've ever seen at the end of a boxing match, when the boxer speaks another language, say they're speaking Spanish, and the translator is there to help the interviewer with the interview. The interviewer will ask a question in English, the translator will ask that question, and then the person will give this long, drawn out answer. And you sit there for about 15 seconds, and then you wonder, how in the world is this interpreter going to interpret what was being said? It's going to speak this and translate this. And then, they give you a quick 5-second answer. And you say, wait, I know they said more than that. Well, what they're doing is they're interpreting that message so that it can be understood by the person that they're speaking to, in this case, the audience or the interviewer. And so when you look at translations, one of the versions of the Bible is a true translation, and the other is more of an interpretation. And so in order to understand what versions do what for you, you've got to ask yourself a question. Am I looking for accuracy, or am I looking for meaning, and what's going to be best for me? So here's some of these are the accurate versions, and these are not all of them, but these are the main ones. The New American Standard Bible, the NASB, is still the most accurate Bible, period, anywhere. The King James Version of the Bible is a good standard. It is great. It is accurate, very good. The English Standard Version, it is accurate as well, although it does start to lean over into some of the more free-flowing form to give you some meaning in some things. A lot like the one that is extremely popular, which is the New International Version, or the NIV. This version is a free-flowing version that is built to help those who read in English get an easy to read, easy to follow kind of version of what the Bible is saying. It's written in paragraphs. So things that we're used to doing. Your New American Standard is like the King James. It's written in the verses, and all of the verses are basically kind of separated from one another. The New King James Version, or if you use a Schofield Bible, what that's basically doing is taking the King James English and bringing it up to a more modern English for us by changing a few of the words here and there to try to make it a little bit easier to understand. But you have these two categories, and one of them is trying to get it accurate. They're trying to hit the target, hit the bullseye on exactly what the original text is saying, versus the other one that is trying to give you some meaning as you're reading, so that you can feel what the author is trying to get you to understand, what the writer is trying to get you to understand, or are trying to help you interpret it as you're reading it. So which is better? It depends on what you're trying to do. So let's do a comparative analysis, so you'll get a feel for what I'm saying, and you can understand, and you'll hear the words, and you'll kind of see. And we'll go through this as quick as possible. I won't try to get too deep, but so I've got all four versions here side by side. This is John 1:18. Notice the first phrase, and you'll start to see some of the differences in these. In the NASB, you have "no man has seen God at any time." The King James says "no man hath seen God at any time." So that word "hath," you start to get into the King James English. I don't recommend the King James. It is traditionally what we use. It is a great version. It is accurate. There are some people that think it is inspired by God, or somehow it's holy and the rest of the versions are wrong. That's not the case at all. The King James Version, the only issue that I have with it, it is written in King James English, and we don't speak that. So if you're not used to hath and thee and thou and though and quicken and all of these other terms, it may be a little bit difficult for you to understand. So when you get to your English Standard Version, it says "no one has ever seen God." Now, if you'll notice in these first three, the NASB and the King James match up pretty well. The ESV, it's still technically correct, but what it's done is it's taken the English and modified it a little bit to add some meaning to it. I can tell you from the original Greek text, when you read this, no man has seen God at any time is the way that that kind of reads. And when you look at the King James Version, it's saying the same thing. No man has seen God at any time. But when you look at the English Standard Version, no one has ever seen God. So you can see it's trying to give you a sense of this is really important, that no one's ever seen God. Then when you get to the NIV does the same thing. No one has ever seen God. All right. So you can see as you go across that when you get to the English Standard Version, which is still accurate, the NIV here is accurate. It's working just fine. And it gives you that meaning that you may not catch if you read no man has seen God at any time, because you may not get that ever seen. It's emphasizing the fact that ever seen at any time may just not flow in the way that we talk now, and kind of gets netted out in the English Standard Version. But then you'll notice in the NIV, after the comma, you hit the word but in all of the other versions, you don't see that. That word is not in there. The word is not in there because it's not in the original text. It's important to understand that, because when you look at the word but usually tells us forget everything else that was said, when in fact, technically speaking, that's not what the writer was doing here. So in the NIV, we get but God, the one and only. That may be a little confusing. If you go to the NASB, it's the only begotten God. The NASB is basically assuming that you would understand the exact Greek text here, that when we get to the words only begotten, that we're actually talking about the Son. When you look at the King James Version, what the translators did in order to help its readers understand, because now what they're doing is they're trying to clear up something that may be ambiguous. The original text is actually the Greek word that comes from theos, which is God. But here they put the word Son in as opposed to God in order to emphasize that this is the second person of the Trinity. In your English Standard Version, it follows the original text, the only God, and doesn't put the word begotten in there. That is actually, and when you go into the original text, you would understand the NASB would be a little bit more accurate. So what the ESV here is doing is basically giving you a Trinitarian look as well. But again, it presupposes that you have the theology behind what you're reading in order to understand it. What the NIV does here, and this is my only issue with the NIV, is there are places where it will do stuff like this, but God, the one and only. That doesn't really help me if I'm new to this, if I'm not up to certain standards of the theology that goes into understanding the Trinity. This will throw me off a little bit. And then we have who was in the bosom of the Father in the NASB, the King James. What is a bosom? I mean, even with the NASB, you have to understand what the bosom is. Most of us think the chest. Then you get to the ESV and it says who is at the Father's side. And what the ESV is doing is getting at the original text. But if I went into the Greek, it's a little real deep meaning. I like the term bosom just because I can go into the original language and understand why it was translated that way. But if you didn't have that background, the ESV is really helping you out here by saying Father's side. And so is the NIV talking about Father's side. And then in the NASB, we get this at the end, he has explained him. And we all know what it means to explain something. And so that we have that, the Son of God has explained the Father. He's explained God. In the King James Version, he hath declared him. See, you don't get the word explained. So when we hear the word declare, we think of a statement being made. He's made a statement about him, or he's made a statement of him. And if I'm, not up to speed with King James English, I may not understand that what the Son is actually doing is he is actually explaining him, helping us to know him, not just declaring him. Your English Standard Version goes into he has made him known. Which, how do you make something known? You explain that thing. And that's what you get with the NIV. One of the things I like about the NASB and what you'll see in the King James is you notice some words will be in italics. Like in your NASB, the word explained, after the word explained is the word him, and him is in italics. The reason him is in italics is because it means that in the original text, this word is not in there. This is the translators adding the word him in order to help you to understand what's being said. What I like about that is they show you where they're adding something and where they're not adding something. Whereas in the King James, they do the same thing. But when you look at the English Standard Version, it doesn't tell you that they've added the word him. Or in the NIV, it doesn't tell you that they've added the word him. And so what you have then is in your NASB, you will not only get an accuracy, or your King James an accuracy, but you'll also understand where the translators actually added a word here or there in order to help you to understand what the actual meaning of this text is. And so, with all of that, what kind of text should you use? For me, my rule of thumb is simple. When I am studying, and I'm a technical studier of Scripture because I'm a teacher, and because of the background that I have with the original languages and the training that I have, I like the NASB. That's what I prefer to study in. But yet in our church, I use a New King James Version because I know traditionally people are used to the King James Version. And instead of bringing a shock to their system, I prefer to go with what is traditional. The NASB is becoming traditional, and more of the other versions are now becoming more traditional to use. The NIV is as well. I don't use the NIV for technical study, but I would say to anyone that is new to Bible study, or if you're really trying to learn and you're just picking it up, the NIV is a great place to start. But I also will say that what Matthew Slick, who is an apologist, he's got a website out there called CARM, it's CARM.org, I believe, has great reference material if you ever are trying to look for something or understand something, especially in the case of some other kind of religious thought. He's probably got information on it. But he says, I suggest that you get one of each, a literal leaning translation as well as a meaning leaning translation. Between the two of them, you'll do fine. I agree. I say if you're a King James lover, get your King James and get an NIV, just so that you can get a better understanding. Or go with the NASB, get the NIV, or get the English Standard Version, or get the NLT, the New Living Translation. That's another one that is absolutely great. Now, here's the secret. You can go to Bible Gateway, BibleGateway.com, and they have just about every version of the Bible. And you can get them, you can actually pull up a panel and put them parallel like this, so that you can read two different versions at the same time. And that's really, really helpful. And hopefully, if you're in your studies, you'll find that what we've talked about here has been informational and helpful to you. And so picking a version, again, this is just a guide. I'm not going to tell you how to go about doing what you need to do, but the next time you go into the bookstore, the next time you're online looking at something, hopefully this will help you understand what you need to be looking for. All right, so that's our information on Bible versions. Like I said, just a real quick, hopefully not too in-depth, but you'll have a way of going about looking for what you need to do in your studies and what's going to work best for you. So again, please, if you're on YouTube, click that subscribe button, give me a comment, hit the like button. If you're on Facebook, share the video, go to YouTube, click subscribe, and let's see if we can get the subscriptions up and the views up. I would appreciate it. And if there's anything that you want me to talk about after we get through with this series, please let me know. Be more than happy to do so. Thanks.